whilst under lockdown conditions and a time period spanning 27 years, topping out as the bestseller on multiple digital marketplaces. Thanks to Lizardcube, Dotemu, and Guide Rush Games, players and fans finally got our fists clenched around the pads for the release of Streets of Rage 4. Vibrant animation, solid and subtle gameplay mechanics, and fantastic music. Feeling new and original all at the same time. It's more than we could have hoped for in many ways. In 2018, I produced my first video game documentary, The History and Future of Streets of Rage, with support from SEGA, Read Only Memory, SOR Online, and many more. So let's revisit and take you on a trip into the wilderness years of the Streets of Rage franchise. It was a strange time to be a consumer watching SEGA at this time, as they seemed really confused about what the actual primary consumer hardware was. You had the Mega Drive Genesis doing extremely well, but had now reached the limits of its technology, so they expanded it with the Mega CD, the Sega 32X, and games requiring both. The Saturn had been thrust out to launch. You had arcades running Sega's Model 2 and Saturn-based Titan hardware, but in terms of the Sega internal that we've now seen later on, both Sega in America and Sega of Japan were developing separate hardware platforms. You also had the Neptune and Sega 64 going on at the time. There was a lot going on. So as an internal first-party studio, who knows where you put your focus for your game development. But through that Saturn cycle of 94 to 98, there was no Streets of Rage forthcoming. Nintendo had doubled down on its franchise characters. Sony had entered the gaming market and literally swept the board with everything. Gaming was maturing in this generation, finding its legroom also into pop culture, and the Dreamcast 1998 was the reset, unifying vision for Sega, bringing together its consumer hardware and arcade platforms to be the same. In 1998 through to 2001-2002, depending on opinion, still Sega did not release or develop many of its classic franchises outside of Sonic, instead forging ahead to create many new ones: Crazy Taxi, Ferrari F355, Outrigger, Shenmue, Headhunter, Jet Set Radio, Space Channel 5, Fantasy Star Online, and many, many more. But amongst them, the calling from the community was, can we please have a new Streets of Rage? It's not that there wasn't attempts in those wilderness years to create a new Streets of Rage game. The Dynamite Cop, known to Western audiences as Die Hard Arcade, once began as Streets of Rage 4. Just down the road from me, Core Design in Derby, the UK studio responsible for the original Tomb Raider, had begun working on a deal to bring Streets of Rage to life in 3D once again, to the 32-bit and 64-bit platforms. Sega learned, however, that the title would be published upon the PlayStation and N64, and they promptly pulled their license away. Development still continued of that game, and the game was released as Fighting Force. A pretty competent game for the time. The characters clearly retextured and reimagined Streets of Rage characters, and there was magazine ads still running for the Saturn release all the way up to the month prior. But in the end, Fighting Force did not get a Sega Saturn release. Fighting Force 2, however, did come to the Dreamcast, but it was changed to become a third-person action shooter, just featuring the main character. Maybe at this time, Sega wasn't quite sure what Streets of Rage was about, and as SRO Online comments, maybe it was a deal-breaker to know that to bring Streets of Rage to a newer generation, the 3D Saturn perhaps wasn't the easiest system to pull off great 3D with. Now, Sega could and should have perhaps looked at titles in its own itinerary. Games such as Guardian Heroes is a great example of a 2D brawler, and perhaps an example of what Streets of Rage 4 could have been like in masterful 2D. In the Dreamcast era, a number of concept videos at basic levels were created, so Streets of Rage was back on, but they were quickly squashed by executives at Sega of America, believing the genre had gone out of fashion, and investment and return wouldn't be forthcoming, and that was that. Now, Sega hadn't quite completely given up on the idea in the Land of the Rising Sun. Sega's AM2 released Spike Out, and also Slash Out, 3D action arcade brawlers based on the Naomi arcade board. A much-touted Dreamcast version never came forthcoming, as Sega then stepped out of the hardware market in 2001. Sega did release an overhaul Spike Out Battle Street on the Xbox in 2004, complete with online play and a multitude of characters that were unlockable. And there was talk amongst the fans online of Axel and Blaze being included. Unfortunately, they were not true. In an interview, Yuzo Koshihiro, the sound producer of Streets of Rage Bare Knuckles, said, "Now Sega's teams are independent, we'll replan it and bring it through Hitmaker first. If they're interested in making it for the Xbox and make a contract with us, I want to restart the plan. He also talked about some ideas he had for the game. I'm thinking about a first-person mode, needless to say in 3D, and the game will connect for online multiplayer. And my sister, ancient art designer Yano Koshihiro, has already designed 5 characters for Streets of Rage 4 already. But nothing was to become of that. In an interview with IGN, Yoriyoshi Oba stated, "I'm thinking of developing more games for the US market like Revenge of Shinobi series and Streets of Rage series, which I once worked on the Genesis." In 2002, that dream was to become a reality as Overworks published a PS2 game that was the continuation of Shinobi. But did that mean they were also working on a Streets of Rage game too? Unfortunately, nothing came of that either. 2008, a few more years in the wilderness have passed, and Sega appeared to be courting a revisit, getting Bottle Rocket Entertainment to develop a game called Streets of Rage Online for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Now, famed artist Roger Robinson of Marvel Comics was assigned to create concept art. However, nothing came of the game after Bottle Rocket went under. Roger Robinson, however, did later reveal publicly the material and the artwork that he had made. Now, Sega's attempt to bring new vision to some of its franchises in the form of Altered Beast did not fare too good at all. Shinobi had its strengths, but when it compared to Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, it felt like a substitute in many gamers' views. Golden Axe also didn't deliver, but the story and the attempt to convey the Conan-esque world is praised, but marred by a dull, bland gameplay and poor level design. The track record in bringing back these marquee titles wasn't great, so you can only imagine what they were thinking about Streets of Rage. Now, Mike Hayes, the Sega chief of the US, spoke to Computer and Video Games in 2010. Now, going forward, if we're going to look at any of our existing IPs to bring out of the locker, we're going to have to make sure the quality to a level we now expect. I'm not saying which IP it would be, Streets of Rage, Crazy Taxi, whatever, but we have to build something that is at least 85% rated. We can't just get away with PR. In 2012, it was revealed that a Swedish developer called Grin Barcelona had been tinkering with the Streets of Rage license since around 2009 through a publishing deal with Sega, embarking on a remake of the original Streets of Rage, releasing digitally through the avenues of Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network and likely Steam too. Grin, much like the other developer, went belly up, and limbo status returned once more. With the end of the world approaching for some, it was a rejoicement for gamers, because in the December of 2012, footage emerged of a pre-alpha build of Streets of Rage 4 from Scottish development studio Ruffian Games. The leaked footage made its way to the net. Everyone rejoiced, however, it was a game that got cancelled. It was just an alpha build. Maybe doom and gloom follows this title around. So from there, 2013 came along. Despite a campaign and a huge petition being handed to Sega's offices in San Francisco, with encouragement from Streets of Rage audio composer Yuzo Koshihiro, unfortunately Sega did not respond and stayed stum on the matter. In the May of that year, artist Avon Batista of Backbone Entertainment, developer of many revival-esque games, who themselves had released Sega's vintage collection to the home console market and PCs, showed new concept art of Axel, Adam, Blaze, and a Syndicate Punk. But it is not known if there was any development into actually developing a full-fledged title. You do have to wonder what Sega are thinking in regards to the vast library and catalogue of franchises and great games they sit on. So the fans have literally taken the bull by the horns. And a good example would be, look at the success of Sonic Mania. Developers who were fans of the game went, you know what, we've got to do it for them, because they're not going to do it themselves. Because Sonic Mania really is the Sonic game that should have been released on the Sega Saturn. And then we come to the title known as Streets of Rage Remake. Beginning in 2003, what followed is more than 8 years of development to create the most complete Streets of Rage experience in 2011 by Bomber Games. Possibly the most obsessive, dedicated fan game ever made, to which all involved must be highly commended. If Sega won't do it, we will. With acknowledgement and the initial go-ahead from Sega, Streets of Rage Remake takes the style of the 16-bit beat-em-up, built and coded originally from the ground up, with slick animation, huge improvement in frames, a large selection of characters from across the series. Adam returns along with the overhauled Max, as well as Mr. X, Shiva, Victor, Rue, Ashley and many more unlockable characters. Movesets are greatly increased, running specials, multiple grab attacks, return of contextual special backup support from the police, So on the rooftop, for instance, the helicopter unleashing hell. Special effects, transparencies, shadows as opposed to black circles, different starting points in the city, following a different multi-branching scenes all tied together into a narrative, and each time can be a different experience. Some nifty fire and lighting, and completing playthroughs gains you coins to buy stuff from the shop, including characters, to enable toggleable functions such as max specials, such as weapons, continuing from scene to scene, custom colour palettes, and Streets of Rage Maker, so make your own Streets of Rage experience. SEGA, though, on its final free release, sent a cease and desist order upon Bomber Games. SEGA probably more than a little annoyed that it's made more fanfare than they did, and embarrassed they didn't make it themselves. So where does this leave the Streets of Rage franchise? Well, it's still literally in the wilderness. If this success has proved anything, along with the spiritual success of games, mini consoles, and the success of the collection titles, there is a hungry market with available income who are both interested and invested. How many more of the classic franchises and IPs are ripe for revival? Drop your ideas and the suggestions below, and I'll see you next time.